Riq Woolen did not have a sophomore slump. Sure, he didn't get as many picks as he did in his rookie season, but he was as elite as ever, and I just can't wait to see him in Mike Macdonald's scheme. Today, we're going to break down his clearly defined strengths and his clearly defined weaknesses. He wins in all of the same ways, and he loses in all of the same ways. So, let's start with his biggest strength, which is his amazing recovery speed. Woolen has a 4.26 40-yard dash time, which is just 0.05 seconds slower than the all-time record. He is absurdly fast. Standing at 6'4", he is also very long, which makes his speed even more impressive and even more useful. This speed gives Woolen his best trait. His recovery speed is amazing. He just doesn't want safety help because he doesn't get beat deep. If you watch my Sam Howell film breakdown, you'll know about the shock concept popularized by LSU, and this concept is often used in the Commanders' offense last year. This play right here is basically shock from the offense's perspective, except they have the outside route running a smoke screen or a now screen instead of that traditional locked hitch. The Seahawks are in a pretty simple man coverage with Woolen matched up on scary Terry McLaurin in the slot, and the coverage is just a cover one hole with one deep safety and one more shallow hole player. After presenting two safeties, Jamal Adams rotates down to take the tight end, and you have Diggs in the deep post and Wagner in the middle of the field. From the offense's perspective, this is pretty much the best look you could hope for. An inside fade is great against middle field closed coverage, which means that you have one safety in the middle of the field that closes the middle of the field. And that's because the safety is just too far away to actually get there to reach this slot fade. Against a middle of the field open coverage, such as cover 2, cover 4, or cover 6, where you wouldn't have someone in the post, you'll have a much harder time fitting this ball in because there's pretty much going to be a safety that's going to be able to get over the top. So right now the Hawks are in a pretty bad spot with their defense versus this concept. But this play shows everything that Woolen brings to the table. McLaurin is actually able to get a pretty good release. He begins with a stutter, and he shows why he's a great receiver with how explosively he's able to get into this route. By the 7-yard mark, I would say that Riq is not in a great spot, and Howell sees this, so he puts the ball up. The entire goal as a wide receiver on this play is to stack the corner, and with this excellent release, Terry McLaurin has now accomplished that goal. But for Woolen, losing at the line isn't that much of a problem. Once Woolen sees that this is going to be an inside fade, he's able to accelerate and keep pace. Even though he fell into a trail technique, which is where you run behind the receiver and try to stay in his back hip, you'll see that he has the speed and the length to still make this play. The ball isn't perfectly thrown, but Woolen is able to recover and use his length to blanket the receiver at the catch point. Even when he loses, he's so good at recovering and salvaging the snap that he really doesn't lose that much deep. And this is what he's been thriving off of ever since he got into the league. Or we could look at this play versus the Browns. I'm going to call this some version of cover 3 match, although it's pretty hard to tell because there's really only 3 Seahawks players in coverage at all. The rest are selling out to stop the run, which happened a lot last year. I know that this is just a tight end, but this play shows that Riq made mistakes, but he also had the speed to cancel them out. As you can see on this play, he tries to come in and stop the run and set the edge, but when this is a bootleg, he's really in trouble. The tight end that he's supposed to be guarding is over 3 yards behind him, and again, this just doesn't matter. Woolen smoothly accelerates and is able to use his length to completely shut off this receiver, and honestly, if this was a well-thrown ball, this would have been picked. This is what Woolen consistently does. He turns a play that he is losing into a play that he wins by a landslide, and this is just so impressive and allows him to be much more aggressive at the line of scrimmage. Riq's other biggest strength is how his speed and length serve him in press man coverage. This next play that I'm going to show you is probably the most impressive coverage snap that I've seen all year, and no, that is not hyperbole. Here, Riq Woolen is aligned in press man coverage against none other than Jamar Chase. The Seahawks here are in a cover 3 look against this 3x1 set from the Bengals, and if we pause this at the top, we can see that Woolen is really not going to get that much help here. The deep safety is turned towards the 3 receiver side, and yes, you do have a little bit of inside help with Adams, but that's pretty much it. As this route goes vertical, Woolen is going to be left on an island and having to defend against one of the best receivers in the NFL. Luckily, this snap starts off pretty well for Woolen. This is just such a great punch The idea of jamming your receiver at the line of scrimmage is that sometimes you can just flat out win the snap right there. Everything in NFL offenses is timing based. With some schemes that is more emphasized than others, but just slowing down your receiver for a half a second can take them out of the play. And this is why every draft season analysts raise concerns about small wide receivers not being able to beat press, because if they are able to get their hands on you and win in a press alignment, then you'll be completely out of the play and useless. This is why smaller receivers need to get creative to find releases and alignments to make sure that they don't get blown out of the play. And Chase is not a small receiver, but Woolen's punch does a ton of damage. Once he sees that Chase is breaking towards the outside, he uses his offhand to slow him down. Most coaches teach that you should use your offhand when you're doing a one-handed punch because this allows you to naturally turn your hips to mirror the receiver. This is just a much safer way to jam someone because you're not selling out and getting burned if you miss. Next, Woolen goes into the perfect trail technique where he uses his hands on Chase to feel out where this route is going to break, and this is just textbook. Again, you're guarding one of the best receivers in the NFL without basically any help, and you completely win at the line of scrimmage and then win all the way down the field. This is the entire package, and this is what I would point to whenever people say that he got worse this year. Like, this is elite. This is special. This is something that only a handful of corners in the NFL would be able to do, and year two to Riq Woolen is one of them. So going back to the intro, these are his strengths. They are really big strengths, and this is what makes Woolen such a great player and a useful player in your system. But he does have a couple of really glaring weaknesses, so let's dive into those. Let's look at this play that demonstrates how Riq Woolen lost last year. Here he's lined up in another press alignment, this time against Odell Beckham Jr. Odell has a pretty simple release with this quick jab, and then he gets into his slant route. And Riq just doesn't have the quickness to be able to keep up. Slants are difficult to cover, but you just can't lose this bad. Woolen has elite speed, but he's often beat by these more shifty wide receivers with quicker breaking routes. Let's look at another one. Here versus the Titans, Woolen is in off-man coverage, and again, just look how slow he is to react, and he just doesn't have that quickness that he needs. His launch speed is elite, but being a corner requires you to move more quickly in short spaces, and Woolen just doesn't have that. Watch his feet once he realizes that this is a slant. That's just not quick enough to be able to break from off-man coverage. We're going to say that right now is when Woolen decides that he has to break on this route, and he really takes like 2 gathering steps before he's able to go anywhere, and this just makes him very late. Compare this play where Woolen just broke on this route to Devin Witherspoon. Here, Witherspoon is in an even worse alignment because he's way off and the Cards are running this drag route. I'm going to play this at full speed at the start just because I want you to get a sense of how quickly Spoon is able to break on this route. The moment that he sees the receiver is running a drag route, he takes 1 step backwards and then he explodes forwards. Side note, this might be my favorite play that Spoon made all year because I really don't think a single other corner in the NFL could stop this player from getting a first down. The combination of speed, quickness, tackling, and football IQ at the end to somehow stop this receiver from getting the first is just amazing, but I'll get to Spoon in a different episode. A big part of playing corner, particularly if you're going to be playing in off coverage, is you need to be able to click and close from depth, and Woolen just isn't quick enough to be good from that situation. I totally get that comparing him to Witherspoon, who's one of the best at clicking and closing, might be unfair, but I think this illustrates that Woolen is just really limited in off coverage. Woolen did have some really good tape when battling underneath, and I think this points to how Mike Macdonald might use him. When he's allowed to play with a press alignment and jams the receiver, he has some really good plays. On this play versus the Commanders, Woolen lands his one-handed jam and then is able to get in the receiver's hip and reach around him with his length. So he does show the capacity to stop some of these underneath routes when he is put in press coverage. Although he does have some good snaps from off coverage, I just don't want him to be there consistently. For this last weakness, I think all Hawks fans know what I'm about to say. Woolen needs to be a better tackler. He missed 14.5% of his attempted tackles last year, and honestly, as a Hawks fan, it felt a lot worse than that. I do want to make a distinction because there's really 2 different ways that you can be bad at tackling. You can have bad effort and you can have bad execution. And I think Woolen has a little bit of both of these problems, but I think it's far more he has execution problems, not really effort problems. His effort is by no means what Witherspoon gives because that's just absurd, but I was watching the tape and I was surprised at how he really does try. Yes, he doesn't try to throw himself into a collision if he doesn't have to, like Spoon might, but I think if Woolen sees something needs to get done, he really does give it his all. I was pleasantly surprised by how many times I saw Woolen attack a screen or insert into the run fit. I don't think that his effort in tackling is really a problem at all. He does want to tackle. It's really just the execution. From a technique perspective, he just lunges way too much, and he really tries to grab players instead of driving through them. Again, Woolen is not only a young player, but he also played wide receiver in college before switching to corner, so he really doesn't have that much experience in the tackling department. And I think this is an area that he can improve at. I'm far more optimistic than I think most Hawks fans are because he really does want to tackle, and he has the length to be really good at this. So once he figures out his technique, I think that he'll be pretty decent, and this won't be a massive hole in his game. So all in all, I'm not really concerned about his tackling. It's going to be annoying for the next couple of years, but I really do think that by the time, he gets into year 4, year 5, he's just going to have that figured out to be a league average corner at tackling. So how is Mike Macdonald going to use Riq Woolen? Well, I think that he's best used as a press man corner, covering that solo receiver in a 3-by-1 formation. I just love him in this role, and I think this is where his best tape is. When you ask him to just eliminate a solo wide receiver, he is just so good at that. And this is his superpower because now you can flood the zones to the trip side and you have 5 defenders over 3 on that side. This can really unlock the defense, and I'm sure that Mike Macdonald is hyped to get to use Woolen in this way. Again, I want to see Woolen in as much press man coverage as possible. Really, whether you're in man or zone, just getting him up to the line of scrimmage, letting him use his length, that is where he shines. I am curious, however, how Mike Macdonald is going to get around Woolen's deficiencies in off coverage. While Macdonald doesn't use off coverage a ton, he certainly does go to it, and I think that mostly scheme and coaching can get around this, but you are going to have to accept some shortcomings, and I'll be interested to see how Macdonald is going to get creative to minimize those shortcomings. Overall, I think Woolen is very underrated. Yes, he didn't get as many picks as he did in his rookie season, but picks are a very luck-based statistic and don't really show that much about how good a player is. He is one of the best in press man coverage in the NFL, and I think Mike Macdonald is going to be able to trust him with a lot this year. His stats might not be great, but he's going to be a key piece of this defense, and I couldn't be more excited to watch Riq Woolen in 2024.